And there's not go through solid-state electronics.
Correct. And what they did was turn this thing on and let it run for maybe 8 hours a day for about 3 days. He wanted to find out, Preston that is, wanted to find out if this technique was valid, i.e. would people hear it in their heads. Now, they did. They had a tape recorder, an automatic answering machine tied to his friend's phone number for about 3 days. They received over 600 phone calls from all parts of the eastern seaboard of the United States and as far away as Florida. When they finally went through them all, they found that there was actually only about 200 separate individuals. Some of them called several times because this message was on the air for about 3 days. It stopped then because of the fact that somebody in the government found out what they were doing, located the transmitter, which was no problem for the FCC, with all of their portable vans, and hauled off the transmitter. Next thing that happens, the tapes are recorded and the telephone system disappeared, and then sometime after that, the gentleman who let his home be used for this little experiment disappeared himself. But he proved the point. You can program a person and condition them in such a manner that from a specialized radio transmitter, they can receive a signal directly without having to carry a little box around in their pocket. The only box they need is a working brain up here, as you'll pick up the signal and decode it. And if they're already preconditioned, this is the key, they must be preconditioned by whatever programming is put into them. If they're preconditioned to hear this signal, because you see, everybody can call in, only people have been preconditioned. They hear the signal, they go for the phone, they call whatever number they're supposed to call, and then what can happen from that point is, this did not happen in this case, but what can happen is that some respondent, whether it be a machine or a person on the other end, will provide a secondary trigger which will then trigger the whole program which this person has buried in them. And then they become the robot, the automaton, to do whatever they're doing, like
mass killers, schoolyards or cafeterias,
or in the tops of the Belfry Tower at UFC Berkeley, which is a famous case there, where this guy went up there, gunman went up there with a rifle and shot about 15 people.
So it's your opinion that it was an experiment? It could have been such an experiment?
That could well have been. And you have the famous case of Sirhan killing Jack Kennedy. He shot wildly. He hit Kennedy with one bullet, but it was proven forensically that the bullet that killed Kennedy never came from Sirhan's gun. It came from somebody behind Kennedy, firing from less than 3 inches from behind his right ear. And that man was, of course, one of the guards who was a substitute that day for the regular guard. They plan these very carefully. But then they have to have a patsy. So Sirhan was a patsy. He was accused, he was tried, and he was convicted, and went off to prison. He probably never did any severe damage to him at all. Then you have, of course, the even more famous case of John F. Kennedy, where they said a single gunman, single bullet theory, which has been so thoroughly exploded in recent years. There were at least 3 assassins, and some of the films show it, and some of the private photos show it. And of course, poor little Mr. Oswald, ex-CIA agent, was the patsy, and they sacrificed him, properly set up, to call him the gunman. And if that wasn't enough, of course, in the basement of the police station in Dallas, Mr. Jack Ruby runs forward and pulls the trigger and shoots Mr. Oswald on national television. He didn't die then either, by the way. He died on the operating table later. They made sure he was dead before he left the operating table. And he said himself, that is Oswald, I didn't kill anybody. He never pulled the trigger. He wasn't even on the 5th floor. And that shows very clearly in the movies. These kind of mind manipulation techniques are everywhere. The problem is we don't know who is pulling them or what they intend to do with them or how far they intend to go.
What would you comment on the implantation of microchips into the human brain for the purposes of listening to the sounds around the person, maybe even getting visual signal from what the person sees, to, from one point on, turning the big master switch and assuming control over that being and actually commanding it what to do. In one of last year's issues of the Mutual UFO Network journal, the MUFON UFO journal, there was a very good article of about maybe 24 papers in official academic medical journals about implantation of microchips into pets and human beings, into human brains, for the purpose of mind control. Some of these papers were from the early 60s, which means that more than 30 years of such research has been going on. This is a topic very important in the field of ufology, with all this mind implantation by the little grays going on. And it has been my suspicion all along that many of these techniques have been in the arsenal of the government, and so one should look first of all into his own government and then into some aliens doing this massive implantation. The rumors are that from 1 in 40 all the way up to 1 in 10 from the United States population have been implanted.
Well, if you go into the history of this type of mind control by signal, by external control, you can go back as early as 1960 when Dr. Delgado was experimenting with implanted chips in the heads of bulls, and he proved in the ring in Spain, I think Barcelona, that a charging bull could be stopped in its tracks by flipping a switch on a little electronic control box on the radio transmitter, which affected this chip buried in the bull's head. The
bull, like a radio-controlled model.
Similar to a radio-controlled model, except he was doing a very simple signal transmission, which caused the bull to turn aside, and it was set up in some manner, which made a very effective control of the bull. He lost his anger, or he was just directed to turn aside. That was publicly demonstrated. Now, that was only the beginning. Nobody has been able to find out exactly what Delgado did since then, but of course you have the spectacle of the CIA continuing, and as microchips were produced, you have had implants which have been found in people's heads by the proper high-definition radar, not radar, but X-ray systems, and also the MRW systems, or MNR. They can also find these chips. But you have more than one class. The initial class was probably developed by our government, possibly in conjunction with alien technology, and possibly strictly on our own. But then you have certain documentary films which the Japanese have produced showing, after interview of people and putting them through CAT scans, they can show implanted devices directly in the brain. They cannot figure out how they got there, and they know damn blessed it well they can never remove them because it would kill the person to try and dig these things out of the brain. And they cannot explain how they got there. They cannot understand the technology involved because it's not terrestrial technology. It's one of the proofs about UFOs and ETs. Some of these implanted devices defy any medical skill we have to put in the head where they are.
Maybe they were beamed inside, beamed down.
It's hard to say how it was. It's hard to say how it might have been done. But they're there. They're easily visible in a layer-by-layer CAT scan as to what part of the brains they're in, and very often they find two of them, one in the left lobe, one in the right lobe. Now, what effect they have is unknown, because it's not been detected in some of these cases that the individuals had particularly erratic behavior. But the technology is there, the technique is there, and where the line ends between U.S. government hardware and control and alien technology and control is very hard to say. But this is...
They all work.
The evidence is they're working together. They're working together.
One for the other.
Exactly. Going to the Phoenix Project, one of the aspects there, of course, was mentioned the radio device, radio transmitter for human people, brains properly set up, would pick up the signal and respond. You have other types of technology which have been developed as a result of the continuing work at Phoenix, at Montauk, elsewhere, because you must also know that there were 25 stations. Every SAGE station was converted essentially to a Montauk-type operation, though they didn't all stay online. Eventually only about 3 left. And how many other projects buried elsewhere were going on, we don't really know. We know of 2.